Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right back to a dramatic 19th century clash of steel, steam, and sea power. We are talking about the Anglo-German naval arms race. It was this massive geopolitical chess match that essentially transformed the oceans into a ticking time bomb right before the First World War.
Listen to this chilling quote from Kaiser Wilhelm II back in 1897. "In 20 years' time, when the Navy is ready, I shall speak a very different language." You can almost feel the menacing ambition dripping off those words, right? The German Empire was a rising star in Central Europe, and they were openly signaling their intent to upset the global balance of power and challenge the traditional juggernauts of the seas.
So here's our roadmap for today. We'll be looking at 1. The ruler of the seas. 2. Germany's rising ambition. 3. The Dreadnought Revolution. 4. An unstoppable arms race. And 5. The breaking point. Let's get right into it.
Part 1. The Ruler of the Seas, and Britain's Unchallenged Supremacy.
After the legendary Battle of Trafalgar in 1805, the British Royal Navy was the undisputed master of the world's oceans. For decades, they enjoyed what was called splendid isolation, just sitting comfortably at the absolute top of the global pecking order. But the rules of the game were changing. In 1890, an American naval officer named Alfred Thayer Mahan published a highly influential book. The Mahan Doctrine argued that sea power was the absolute key factor for any strong nation looking to prosper and exert global influence. This wasn't just some popular book. It became the foundational philosophy driving navies across the entire globe, and it found a very, very eager audience in Germany.
Now think about this single, staggering number for a second. 58%. For Britain, naval supremacy was not just about pride. It wasn't just about global influence. It was about survival. By 1900, 58% of the caloric intake for the average British citizen actually came from overseas. That is massive. If Britain lost control of the seas, they wouldn't just lose their empire. Their people would literally starve. The stakes could not have been higher.
Moving on to Part 2. Germany's rising ambition as a new challenger emerges.
So what kicks this whole conflict off? Well, a young Kaiser Wilhelm II takes the German throne, fires the masterful diplomat Otto von Bismarck, and decides it is time for Germany to step out of the shadows and challenge the British directly. To pull this off, he brings in Admiral Alfred von Tirpitz, who pitches this fascinating but definitely flawed strategy known as Risikogedanke, or risk theory. The big idea was to build a German fleet exactly 2/3 the size of Britain's. Tirpitz calculated that this would make it mathematically too risky for Britain to ever attack without suffering crippling losses themselves. But here is the profound irony. Tirpitz thought this threat would force Britain to ally with Germany. Instead, it utterly terrified the British and drove them straight into the arms of Germany's biggest rivals, France and Russia.
Which brings us to Part 3, the Dreadnought Revolution, and a complete technological reset.
To counter this growing menace across the North Sea, British Admiral Sir John Fisher initiated a radical overhaul of the Royal Navy. You see, Britain was actually legally bound to maintain overwhelming superiority through something called the Two-Power Standard. Enacted back in 1889, this mandate legally required the Royal Navy to be as strong as the next two largest fleets in the world combined. So the second Germany started building up, Britain was legally and existentially obligated to outbuild them. And Fisher completely changed the game in 1906 when Britain launched the HMS Dreadnought. This ship was an absolute beast. It was faster, hitting 21 knots compared to the usual 18. It was powered by new steam turbines, and it featured a uniform main battery of 10 massive 12-inch guns instead of a mixed bag of smaller weapons. Total marvel of engineering. But there is a massive catch here. The Dreadnought was so advanced that it instantly rendered every older battleship on Earth completely obsolete. And yes, that included Britain's own fleet. In a flash, Fisher inadvertently reset the arms race back to zero. He basically handed Germany a fresh chance to catch up.
All right, Part 4, an unstoppable arms race and spiraling escalation.
Over in Germany, Admiral Tirpitz was deeply troubled by the debut of the HMS Dreadnought. But he felt Germany had absolutely no choice but to respond in kind, which kicked off a frantic, incredibly expensive building frenzy. Driven by Tirpitz, Germany passed 5 successive naval laws between 1898 and 1912. Every single law pushed for more ships, bigger guns, and astronomically larger budgets. It became this intense theatrical display of national identity and military might, aggressively fueling Anglo-German hostility year after year.
And the panic in Britain? Oh, it was palpable.
By 1909, a massive intelligence failure and sheer terror over Germany's new dreadnoughts led to a full-blown Navy scare. The British public was absolutely terrified of a German blockade. You literally had citizens and politicians echoing this famous slogan through the streets: "We want 8 and we won't wait." They were demanding the immediate construction of 8 brand new dreadnoughts just to secure their island.
But as we know, ships aren't free. The immense economic toll tore right into Britain's domestic politics. To pay for the ships, along with some new social programs, the Liberal government introduced the People's Budget, levying unprecedented taxes on the wealthy, while the House of Lords furiously rejected it, which sparked a massive constitutional crisis in 1910. Ultimately, both of these nations were just bleeding their economies completely dry, prioritizing astronomical naval spending over the actual welfare of their own citizens.
Finally, Part 5, the breaking point, where diplomacy completely fails. By 1912, the staggering financial suffering led the elites and the public in both nations to desperately seek a de-escalation. They were effectively broke, and the tension was just unbearable. So they tried to talk it out during the 1912 Haldane Mission. The negotiations basically went like this. Step 1. Britain says, hey, we won't interfere with your empire as long as you allow us to maintain naval supremacy. Step 2. Germany counters by demanding unconditional British neutrality in any future European war. And Step 3. Britain flatly refuses, knowing full well that would give Germany a free pass to attack France and Russia. The Kaiser's stubbornness and Britain's deep-seated fears absolutely doomed those diplomatic efforts.
So, when the talking stopped, the building continued. But Britain's vastly superior financial resources allowed them to simply outspend and outbuild Germany. By the time Winston Churchill laid out the final plans, Britain aimed for a 60% margin. Ultimately, when World War I broke out, Britain had 56 dreadnoughts, sitting against Germany's 35. Britain decisively won the numbers game.
But that brings us to a really heavy final thought. During the war itself, these massive, incredibly expensive dreadnoughts only clashed once in a major way, at the Battle of Jutland in 1916. While Britain actually took heavier losses there, Germany's numerical inferiority meant their high seas fleet had to retreat, and they spent the rest of the war literally hiding in port. So I want to leave you with this to think about. If the greatest fleets ever built spent the defining conflict of their era just rusting at the docks, was this naval arms race truly a strategy for victory, or was it just a colossal monument to national hubris? It's a fascinating, tragic piece of history. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the past.